I never really understood it until I talked more about it. And so the superpower was a joy, but then the amplifier for it was me being comfortable with it.
What if joy wasn't something you feel, but a tool you use? Welcome back to the Well Woman Show, where we support you to lead with ease, live with joy, and create meaningful impact on your own terms. I'm your host, Giovanna Rossi. If you've been listening for a while, you know joy is one of the four words at the heart of everything we do here on the Well Woman Show: ease, joy, impact, and self-trust. Today's episode is a masterclass in joy in the best way. My guest, Bose Akadiri, known as the Joy Amplifier, CEO of Goal and Grind, and author of the Stay Joyful Method. Bose spent years building her career inside Fortune 500 companies like Boeing, Salesforce, and JP Morgan before stepping fully into her own business. And what she's built since is a framework for using joy as a real decision-making tool. Not a nice to have, but a strategy for leadership, fulfillment, and long-term impact. We talk about what it means to install joy as an operating system, why so many people are skeptical of that idea, and how Bose used her own joy as a compass to leave corporate life behind. This conversation is full of heart, full of practical wisdom, and yes, full of joy. Here's my conversation with Bose Akadiri. I'm speaking with Bose Akadiri today. I'm so excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Giovanna. I'm really happy to be here. Appreciate your invitation.
Awesome. Well, let's get into it. There's so much that we're going to talk about today, but I'd love to just start with you sharing with listeners, who are you in the world today?
Oh, that's a great question. Who is Bose Akadiri in the world today? Well, first off, I'm the Joy Amplifier. And what I mean by that is I teach people and teams how to leverage joy as the greatest resource in their life. I'm the CEO of a company called Goal and Grind LLC, where we do motivational speaking, corporate training programs, and it's all rooted from a place of joy. I'm also the author of a newly released book called The Stay Joyful Method. And as you have heard, joy, 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 that. Oh, yes, you have it right there. Perfect. And so my big thing is really I'm building the business case for joy. I have worked at 3 different Fortune 500 companies, and the thread to my success, not only there professionally, but also personally, is really being able to tap into my own joy and leverage it as a resource and not just a fluff item. So
Yeah.
I'm enjoying life doing research on joy, teaching people how to use it, and that's who I am.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, we're going to get into it. But I do love that you say you leverage joy and also that you're building the business case for joy. And so that really takes it beyond just kind of like, oh, well, we just all want to really feel good all the time and everything, which is also fine and great. But you're taking it to this next level of like, how can we use that in business and in corporate settings and in organizations? And so, yeah, talk a little bit about that process.
So that process really starts with, I like to think of it as a decision. Not always an easy decision because I know a lot of people out there might be skeptical to this idea. But when you think about it, when you equip women, men, anyone with a framework that changes how they perform and not just how they lead, they actually stay longer. So the work that I'm doing is installing joy as an operating system. And so there's 2 key foundations to this framework. The first is the joy bubble, and that's what helps people to start to understand and identify and intentionally protect not only themselves, but the environments, the relationships, and the inputs that best fuel their work. So, understanding what type of work do I enjoy? What type of work do I not enjoy? And then coupled with what I call your accomplishments journal. So that creates a practice where you are very intentionally creating an evidence-based record of what have you done? What are those skills that you have? So then together, that's when you start to step into your purpose of understanding, okay, this is the work I enjoy. This is the work that I'm skilled at. And how do I find the crossover in that Venn diagram? So you think of it as the joy bubble reminds you why you're doing the work, and the accomplishments journal reminds you that you are doing the work and you can
Mm.
build upon that success. So that's what I really mean when I'm building the business case for joy.
Yeah, and so but are you mostly talking to people who are trying to figure out what they wanna do with their lives? Or are they, like, early career, mid-career, later in transition? Like, who is this for?
Ooh, that's a good question. And it's really honestly, Giovanna, you might be one of the first people that's asked me this, so I really like it. It grows with you
Mm.
because we change as humans. And so this framework also gives you the permission to grow and to reflect. And so it's not something that you do once and, oh, I'm all set, right? Because the things that we are enjoying and the things that we have knowledge of change as we grow. So the early career folks, it helps them more with shaping where they want their career to go, shaping how they're going to network. And then as you get into mid career and C suite level, it really helps with being that leader that can lead by example and help shape organizations into the type of organization where people want to stay. And we can get into some of the data on joy in the
Mm.
workplace a little later.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Okay, so I'm very intrigued with this because I want to ask you, for those people who listening who are like, that just sounds too like Pollyanna, like I just don't see being like happy all the time. Like, isn't this just kind of like faking it? What do you say to that? Like how do you address the skeptics?
Well, I would say first off, um, happiness and joy, I think, are two separate things. Happiness is more of that feeling and it's fleeting. Joy is something that you want to be choosing. And so think of it this way: when you're setting your goals from a place of joy and from a place of, oh, I'm excited to be doing this, then you are more likely to succeed in those goals because even in the hard times, you understand where they're taking you rather than having goals that are not based in anything that you're excited about, that you understand its impact on those around you and the community impact that you can have. You're really more rooted and foundational. The other thing I would say is let's talk about data, right? Let's not talk about the how. Let's switch the conversation to the data. So, for any skeptics, I definitely suggest looking. For example, BCG had a study where they studied, I think it was over 11,000 people in the workforce. And they found that 49% of people who were not finding joy at work were actively looking for outside of employment. And so this really is a financial and a retention issue when you look at companies. And I'm not talking about short term, I'm talking about long term.
Mm.
Because when you start to have retention issues, you're looking at long term spending.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes. In some of my other work, I work a lot with companies and employers and how they can recruit and retain, you know, great people and the retention is really the hard part and it costs companies a lot of money if they can't retain those employees. So when you work with folks, you work mostly with the employee or do you work with employers?
I work with mainly employers. So folks will bring me in to do like their offsites, to do fireside chats, things like that. But specifically, the leadership alignment workshop that I have, it's really great because oftentimes you'll see teams that are fragmented and they might be saying, this is what our team does. Somebody else might be saying a completely different thing. And it's important for the teams to be aligned. And so when I come in to do that, I do it in 5 steps. Essentially, the first step, of course, is rooted in joy. And I don't just walk in and say, let's have joy. But the exercises that we do make space for people to remember, why did I want to do this work in the first place? It takes you back to that time when you were interviewing. So if you think about it as a leader, when you are in that management position and you're interviewing folks, I know there were times when I interviewed folks for a role and I thought to myself, it feels like I'm pulling teeth. They do not want to be in this interview. They do not want this job, but somebody told them that they should apply for it. Whereas on the other hand, when you're interviewing people and you can tell not only do they have the skills, but they're excited about the role, that's the type of person you want in the seat. It's better for them, it's better for the team, and it's better for the broader organization. So the first thing that I do when we go into these offsites is really coming back to the core of the work. What is it doing for the community? What is it doing for the organization? What is it doing for the individual? And remembering that why. And then going from there and taking a step further and validating the team's history. It's so easy for us to focus on the negative and to say, we had a to do list of 10 things and there was one thing that didn't get done, and everybody's talking about that one thing. I take us back to the accomplishments and let's talk about what we did get done. Let's talk about the future opportunities and what we can do. So that's the foundation for setting the team level goals, setting the team level vision, and being able as a leader to align the team on those things.
Oh, I love it. Okay.
Incredible.
I love it. All right. And so for listeners who know the Well Woman framework, we talk a lot about ease and joy. And so I love this is part of why I wanted to talk to you because it was so aligned in a lot of ways. And just sort of what you were saying, but also adding in the ease part. And it's not to say things have to be easy. It's not easy, but it's ease, right? You're in flow. Like things are um you feel like you can breathe. It's not all like tense. And then adding the joy. And those are two really important parts of this framework that I work with. And so I'd love to know from you, like, what does some of the other data say on joy? Like you talked about that one study, but what other research have you found that really shows that we should be paying attention to this?
So there's a lot of other research out there. And I would say the biggest thing that stood out to me is that it's not linear. It's not like I have to have joy every day, I have to have joy every moment. But there's actual research that's found that you can reclaim your joy.
Mm.
And that will support you in future endeavors, not only with the community that you're building, but also with your own personal satisfaction. And I think that's a really important thing to remember because we're all going to have ups, downs, all the way around. But to remember that at any moment, you can reclaim that joy. And so,
Mm.
one of the ways that I focus on that is that joy bubble tool, because it's literally about journaling what brings you joy. So, when you have those difficult times, you can go back to that and take something out of that joy bubble and do it for yourself rather than staying in the rut. So
Mhm.
that's how joy becomes a tool also individually.
Yeah. And so is this when you lead people through this in a team, like at work, are you connecting them to the joy they have at work, or is it does it also get personal? Like what in your personal life brings you joy?
Both. So it depends on what the team's brought me in for, of course. I want to focus and honor what their greatest need is, but I do have a module that is really focused on goal setting from a place of joy. And that we look at four key areas of life: personal, professional, health, and financial. And people are always very skeptical like, how can you have joy in your financial life? And that looks like spending your money according to your joy.
Mhm.
Oftentimes people think finance and professional is the same, but you might have certain money goals, but then be moving differently in your career, but they need to align.
Mm.
So it is both professional and outside of work, but outside of work, it's not one bucket. It's how are you taking care of and supporting your health? It's how are you paying attention to your finances from a point of using joy as your decision maker. For example, with me, I moved from Oklahoma City to Chicago. I had no job and no network, but I knew the job I wanted and I knew I was going to be spending money more in alignment with what brought me joy.
Mm.
So it all worked out. 12 years, here we are.
Oh, wow, you've been there for 12 years. And
Mhm.
when did you start your business doing this?
So I started my business 6 years ago and I ran it alongside my corporate career until about a year ago.
Oh,
And
wow.
so yes, yes. So it's exciting. I what do you call it? Retired, if you will, from corporate America in 2025. And the big thing about my business is just like myself, I believe in continual growth. And from the beginning, I have always surveyed every single client, whether it was an individual or a group, in order to understand where are we growing, how can I make improvements. So, one great example is I have a module on networking from a place of joy. And I recently spoke on it at a SHRM conference. And I got the feedback that someone wanted to know how could we incorporate AI into our networking? So I went back and I thought about my own practices. And then the next month, I was speaking at another global conference at ATD, Association for Talent Development, and I incorporated that. So those folks got an up leveled version thanks to someone's generous time in actually filling out the survey and telling me what they wanted to learn more.
Yeah, oh, that's good. So you're learning the whole time and growing. And so you started your business. Are you retired from corporate and you're doing your this business full time now for a year? And I think that's great. And for listeners, to just think about what are you doing in your life and how would you like to make that big shift? Because that's what you've done here. And I want to ask sort of how that happened. How were you able to manage that? But also, where did you come from? Like, what was your corporate background?
Oh, okay. Yes. So I worked at Boeing, Salesforce, and then JP Morgan. And at all places, I did corporate social responsibility, which is essentially the corporate philanthropy arm.
Yeah.
I love that role. That's the other thing that I think is important for people to start to understand. You can have more than one role that you really love, and they can support each other. So whenever I left JP Morgan last year, I was very fortunate. I got to leave from a place of I've done work that I really enjoyed, and it was very strategic work. It was very integrated with different business units, which gave me an opportunity to learn from different areas of each company that I worked at. And I know that those shape also how I do my work now. But how it happened was I kept learning and growing. And essentially, when I first started my business, it was because people kept saying, how did this girl from Oklahoma show up and end up at all these companies? And the truth of the matter was, I was following my joy. I knew exactly what type of work I did, and I never sought out a specific company. I sought out the type of team I wanted to be on. I sought out the type of work I wanted to be doing. And to be transparent, I also needed to make sure that they had the right finances in place to be able to bring me there. So, my work in corporate was very intentional, and when I had the opportunity to start sharing how I let joy lead my life and be my decision-making compass, it was a natural progression. I always knew I wanted to have my own business, but
Mm.
this helped shape what that business would look like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And did you have a mentor? Like, we're just about to air a show all about mentorship, so it's on my mind. Did you have a mentor? And also, parallel question, how did you have that confidence to just say, I'm going to be really intentional about this. I'm seeking out what I want. I'm not just going to say yes to the first offer.
Yeah, so that's really a hard thing to do. And I want to say that before I say anything else because I have said those no's before. So one no that I said no to when I was at Boeing, someone had approached me and said, I want to recommend you for this role. And I did two interviews and I thought, I really respect this person. I respect their team, but I'm not right for this. This is not where I see my career going. So I just called them and I had a really open, honest conversation and said, look, um, I would love to come on your team, but I don't think it's the right fit. And I don't want to do that to you and your team.
Mm.
And I gave her a recommendation of somebody else and she ended up interviewing them and it was a great situation. But I think you need to, not I think, I know, you need to know yourself well enough to be steering your career. No one else is going to steer your career but you. So now onto mentors. You asked about mentors. Yes,
Yeah.
I believe in having multiple mentors for a couple of reasons. First off, people have different expertise. And then the other reason is you don't want to burn your mentors out. And as you're having conversations with them, you need to be able to decipher who you go to for what. Everyone works differently, they have different points of view. So, for instance, I have a mentor who he is not at all in the same industry as me. However, he is an amazing businessman. And I remember when we first met, we connected on LinkedIn and I could see his business acumen. And so I just sent him a message and I said, look, we met like 6 months ago. I've seen what you're doing. I am in business for myself and I still have my corporate job. Can I take you to lunch and pick your brain? And I'm also a big believer in reciprocal relationships. So I pay for lunch with my mentors and I make sure that I'm asking them what they need from the relationship. I'm honoring their time by coming with very specific questions. And yeah, I build that relationship. I want to contribute to them as much as I am grateful for them contributing to my success. Uh, you
Yeah. Okay. And then while we're on this topic, so mentors that we're talking about are sort of external, right? They're actual real people that we like go and talk to. But there's also in my framework in my work, there's this idea that like we have this inner mentor. And actually Tara Moore has talked a lot about this in her book Playing Big. And but for the well woman framework, I talk about the inner well woman, right? That inner knowing that you have, that inner confidence and tapping into that. And I work with a lot of women leaders who are very disconnected from that part of themselves. And so we reconnect to that and I find that, I'm more encouraging women and supporting women to talk to that part of themselves
know.
more. I mean, not that you don't need those other mentors, because of course you do. You need the knowledge and the skill and the information, the resources. But a lot of those questions you can answer yourself.
Exactly. And I love that you said your inner mentor because we often forget everything we know. Right? We've had so many experiences and it's easy to forget. One thing that I really like to help jog the memory, as we were talking about earlier, is that accomplishments journal and taking that practice. So the way that I do it is every Friday, I have a 15-minute appointment with myself in my calendar. And that's my time to sit and reflect and be my own cheerleader and
Yeah.
remember, what have I done this week? And I'm always surprised at the end of the month, I aggregated, at the end of the quarter, and at the end of the year, I do another aggregate. And I'm like, well, I'll just tell you, my book, I say, you need to be able to wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, you go, girl. Like you need to give yourself a couple you go girls every morning. But it becomes easier, like you said, that practice, especially us as women, we're not always taught to be our own mentor. And I appreciate you bringing that up. I love that. I'm so glad we're having this conversation.
Me too. I really love it. I love it. Yeah, I mean, we're socialized as women to not trust ourselves, to not trust our own thinking, our own knowledge. And so it's really important to have these spaces where we can have these conversations and reinforce that we do know. We have a lot of wisdom and we carry that through generations too and we can tap into that.
Right.
Uh,
And like you were saying, the ease of it. When you tap into that, you have more ease.
mhm.
And so that's a lot of the work that I do with women leaders is your joy can guide you. Don't let anyone tell you any different because you've had these experiences, you've had these great accomplishments. And like you said, let's go with ease and not friction.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's it for our show today. Remember, if you need support to live your well woman life, follow us on Instagram at Well Woman Life. And don't forget, you can catch the show on NPR anytime. Just head to npr.org/podcasts and search for The Well Woman Show. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and leave us a quick review. It really helps others find the show. I always love hearing from you, so drop a comment or message me on socials at Well Woman Life. I'm Giovanna Rossi for The Well Woman Show. Until next time, have a super powerful week.